Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. I know this has been, for some of you, quite a challenging situation to the flights for those coming from abroad. Indeed, this is a bit unfortunate, so yes, a lot of participants that could not join us as foreseen. So that only makes us more thankful for all of you that are here today. So we will apart from that, some interesting discussions. We have decided to make in-person event, so not hybrid, exactly to promote, after all this period, that people could meet with each other, in particular also from our sector. And that will still be an opportunity today, and we hope everyone enjoys. We will also have the event later on available on video. So the event, even if it's not broadcasted, it will be recorded and it will be available on video. So for all those interested, and in particular those that could not attend today from outside or from Brussels, so that they can also follow the discussions. With that said, I would like to move on. And first of all, to introduce one of our board members. So unfortunately, our president was one of the victims, in this case not of the flight cancellation, but of COVID. He's recovering. That means that he was not able to come to Brussels today. So we will have welcoming on behalf of our board director, Joachim Bistrom. Joachim, please.
So, thank you. Well, this is an important moment for us. It's 30 years since we formed this association of solar thermal industries, 1992 in Athens. 10 years later, we moved to Brussels and became STIF, and now we are rebranded as Solar Heat Europe. That clearly states what we want to do. And basically, we have two functions. We work to create a dialogue between the European solar thermal industry and also the dialogue with policymakers and politicians. And especially those last months, this dialogue with the policymakers has of course been very important in the situation that we have. The solar thermal industry has all the time developed. From the solar panels that was developed in the 1990s, we have come far away today. And we see that all the technical system has developed and also the markets have expanded. From the beginning, the solar panels were used for just small domestic hot water systems. Then we have seen this fantastic growth with thermosiphons in the southern Europe, but also with pressurized system for larger buildings in northern Europe and hotels. Now we have seen a fantastic growth in the district heating market, where the business has developed, creating new solar panels with a larger aperture that is more efficient for the district heating systems. And we also expand now in the industrial systems, where the business has started to develop high temperature, both with low vacuum flat plates and concentrating systems like parabolic troughs and Fresnel systems. So from having those simple systems that we had 30 years ago, today the solar thermal sector can span a wide range of technical solutions for every type of heat need in buildings and cities and industries. We also now dip our toes a little in the electric market, as we are having companies developing the combination of photovoltaic and thermal solar panels. So I think this is also a fast-growing sector where the solar thermal industry will need to develop a lot the coming years. And as you hear, we have always been a sector that has been developing and adapting to the changing needs. And right now we have a very dramatic situation in Europe. We have a triple-fold crisis. First, we have the climate crisis. And when I came back from Glasgow, I thought that now it's really time to fix this climate crisis. But what happened just a few months later was that we got a political crisis, where Mr. Putin threatened to cut the gas supply for Europe if we didn't fulfill his demands. And then we have now an energy cost crisis where we have industry struggling to fill the bills. So this triple crisis with climate crisis, political crisis and cost crisis is actually something that we in the solar thermal business is well suited to handle. And it's all about energy security. And what could be better when you talk about energy security than producing the heat that you need for your activity directly on site? And of course, producing the electricity with PV panels and having the heat from solar thermal panels. So I think generating the energy that you need locally is the solution forward here. And we as a sector also have another advantage if we compare to the other renewable energy sectors, and that we are super quick in developing and deploying those systems. If we compare to wind power or to PV, we have the potential of quickly solving a large part of the energy puzzle. I think this is something that I haven't really appreciated in the past, that we are using quite simple material we can obtain in large volumes, and that we have hundreds of thousands of people who are suited to be trained to install solar thermal systems. So for this triple challenge, we actually have the resources to solve a large part of it. And as an example, now we look how the PV and wind business are trying to solve the electric sector. And I think if we look back, it will take about 20 years for the for the PV panels to handle the electric sector. But then the heat sector is double the size of the electric sector. And if we imagine that we will replace all the gas pipe with new electric grid, it will be too slow when we see the challenges that we have ahead of us. And if we look specifically at the Russian gas, only 10% of the Russian gas is used for producing electricity. 10%. And still this is what takes the attention of the politicians. 30% is used for heating houses with district heating, 30% is used in industry, and 30% is used directly burning gas in buildings to create heat. So if we're going to handle the Russian gas crisis, we need to look at the 90% that is heat, and not only on the 10% that is electricity. And again, here is the time scale. To turning this whole system into renewable energy, we really need to use the solar thermal panels to handle this situation. And on your chairs, you can see the commitment from the solar thermal sector. We have committed to installing 140 gigawatt hours to 2030 in Europe if we get the right tools and support. And that would be a big change to the energy system. So with this, and I would like to welcome you to this conference. I think we will have a very exciting day. But the main message here is we have an urgent task, and solar thermal is the quickest way to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joachim. So with this, I would like to introduce you to someone that will be much more competent and nicer than me, leading the rest of the discussion and promoting also what will surely be an interesting discussion. So with this said, I would like very much to introduce to you a journalist, which also is a well-experienced moderator, Anna Gumbau. Anna, please.
I need some extra hands. Well, all right, so good afternoon, everyone, and thanks a lot for having made it today here in Brussels, despite the very challenging circumstances, to say the least, at least from a logistical point of view. So my name is Anna Gumbau. I'm a climate and energy journalist, and I have the pleasure to moderate our two sessions today, in which we will be discussing why heating decarbonization is a strategic imperative, and the different policy options and the different market developments that will make a solar thermal strategy, which we will also be seeing presented afterwards, happen. So if I can have the next slide, Pedro. I'm going to be very quick in introducing the program today. So we're going to have two panel discussions. So first of all, one that's going to be more focused or even taking a step back, so to say, on heating decarbonization overall, and the different policy files that are at the moment being negotiated and taking place. So we will see to which extent heating decarbonization fits into the EU's larger climate and energy plans. Then we will have a 15-minute coffee break, and then we will have a second panel discussion where we will be zooming into solar heat, and we'll also have Solar Heat Europe. Is it?
Maybe if you get away from.
Right, I see. It's kind of technological stuff. We didn't have to deal with for 2 years. Anyway, so we will be zooming into solar heating, and in this case, Solar Heat Europe will be presenting its roadmap for 2050 to scale up solar heat. So while we sort out anyway, I think we should be working out. Thank you very much. But in any case, without further ado, let's get the first one of our panels started. So if I can invite my first co-panelists to join me here on stage, please. So we're going to start the first one of the sessions. As I said, we'll be looking into the policy developments on the one hand, and also what's the signal that it's giving to markets. So we have a little bit of different sides, from policymakers, from industry to civil society, represented in this debate. And I'm sure that we're going to have a very exciting first session discussing the latest developments. I'm sure you're at this stage all familiar with all the Repower EUs and renewable energies directives and so on. But we're going to also have a little bit of a recap to understand how all these different policy measures and files somehow intertwine together. Before I introduce the speakers joining me on stage, we have a video from European Commissioner for Energy, Kadri Simson.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to speak to you today. This year is an important milestone for Solar Heat Europe. You have been the voice of the European solar thermal industry for 30 years, and a strong force accelerating heat decarbonization. But there is still much work to be done. Heating and cooling constitutes around half of our overall EU energy consumption, and this sector still relies heavily on fossil fuels. As the clean energy transition progresses, this has to change. Decarbonizing this sector is a priority. And now, since Putin's unjustified attack on Ukraine, there is even more urgency behind the renewables rollout. As a response to these new geopolitical developments, we came out with our Repower EU plan in May. Its aim is to remove Russian energy imports completely from our system as soon as possible. Considering how reliant our heating demand is on gas, the sector will be central to the overall goal. To deliver on this ambition, one of the core elements of the Repower EU plan is to accelerate the deployment of heat pumps and solar energy in buildings. This means front-loading the installation of 10 million heat pumps in the next 5 years and at least 30 million new heat pumps by the end of the decade. We are also proposing to replace gas-fired heat generation with electricity. To be effective, our actions must be matched by building renovation and district heating system modernization. The climate target plan highlights the need to considerably ramp up building decarbonization. This is primarily because renovation has been lagging behind required rates for a long time, and because it takes time to deeply renovate the 220 million building units. Therefore, there should be no more on-site greenhouse gases produced from energy use in buildings by 2040 at the latest. We start by phasing out subsidies for fossil fuel-based boilers, and we must act urgently. In the REPowerEU plan, we have envisaged 2025 as the end date. New fossil fuel boilers would be banned from the markets by 2029 through eco-design and energy labelling legislation. With targets alone, success is not guaranteed. We need a stronger role for regional and local authorities. It is crucial to provide them with the resources and the nationally backed mandate to develop local plans for renewable heating and cooling. This is also a better way to involve and to reach out to citizens. The REPowerEU plan takes another step further towards citizen engagement by setting the goal of having at least one renewables-based energy community in every municipality, with a population higher than 10,000 by 2025. On solar specifically, to accelerate deployment, the Commission has put forward an EU solar energy strategy, because the need for solar technology cannot be underestimated. Solar rooftops could provide almost 25% of EU's electricity consumption, which is more than the share of natural gas today. To make use of the untapped potential, we aim to install roughly 45 gigawatts of solar energy per year. This would ensure PV capacity of 320 gigawatts by 2025. The strategy also includes the European Solar Rooftops initiative. Our goal is to make solar panels on the roofs of public and commercial buildings mandatory in the coming years. In the future, it will also cover new residential buildings. Despite these plans, we have to also acknowledge potential pitfalls. In recent years, we have been facing a major barrier. Getting a permit for solar projects might take up to 4 years. This is time we do not have. To reduce the barriers to the installation of solar energy in buildings, we propose that permit granting procedures for these installations don't exceed 3 months. Next to acceleration, more innovative solutions are needed. The European Commission supports new approaches towards smarter and more sustainable energy system. I'm very proud to say that the private sector has been leading the way here. Companies like RoofFit Solar Energy are building integrated photovoltaic construction elements. They combine the roofing material and PV module into a 2-in-1 solution. Turning a conventional roof into a solar panel is an efficient solution that doesn't compromise on appearance. If I take this as just one example, the future of solar looks bright. With the latest technology, solar is set to become more affordable, flexible, and applicable everywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, the ambition and urgency of REPowerEU creates opportunities for all renewable technologies that are available today. That is clearly the case for solar heat technologies, and I am convinced that your sector will be able to rise to the challenge. Thank you for listening, and I wish you all an excellent conference.
Thank you very much to the Commissioner for her welcoming words, and I believe that we will have a lot to discuss based on that. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers for this first panel. So, representing the European Commission's Directorate General for Energy is Mr. Łukasz Kolicki, Head of Unit for Renewables and Energy Systems Integration. So, thanks a lot for being with us. Then next to me, there's Guglielmo Cioni. He is the Vice President for Business Development at TVP Solar and Vice President of Solar Heat Europe as well. And next was also Sanjeev Kumar, representing the Renewable Heating and Cooling Alliance. So we also were meant to have a member of the European Parliament, Nicolás González Casares from the Socialists and Democrats. He unfortunately could not make it because of the strike. So it's a shame that we won't be able to discuss all that's going on from the European Parliament's side, but at least I hope we're going to be able to get a big picture of what is going on from the policy side. And in this case, I would like to start with Łukasz Kolicki. So, Mr. Kolicki, the REPowerEU has very ambitious targets and proposals to reduce the EU's dependency from Russian gas, a significant share of it coming from renewables. So I think something very interesting from us would be to hear from you. What is the role of heating decarbonisation in the overall both the Repower EU and the Renewable Energy Directive strategies, which are like two separate which are two separate files, but somehow like are very intertwined together. So if you could discuss a little bit how these two different policy files interact.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for the comment to the Commissioner's speech, which is, I must say, a little bit intriguing. So I'd like to hear more about it later. But okay, the Commissioner has outlined these main elements in the Repower EU plan that relate to renewable heat. And I would like to take a step back and a little bit say, you know, what the European framework for renewables, and in particular for renewable heat, looks like, and how we're trying to strengthen it against, indeed, quite a few challenges. And it was already said that that the situation, the geopolitical situation today, the war in Ukraine, the plan to phase out Russian fossil fuels, that means we will have less natural gas to heat our homes, and that needs to be replaced with something else. And renewable heat is in a very good position to do it. It was mentioned that most of the gas that we import from Russia is for heat purposes. And therefore, in one of the elements in this Repower plan that we propose, that we put on the table, is further increase of the renewables target. You know that the current one for 2030, that's 32% of renewables compared to 22% of renewables achieved in 2020. We proposed last year 40% in 2030, but now we're raising it up exactly to stimulate further deployment of renewables. Now, this overall share, that's nothing else as the sum of sectoral shares. And heating and cooling takes half of energy consumption. So basically, if you want to meet this higher renewable target, you need to deploy renewables in heating and in cooling. And it's very, very clear this is a sector which has not realized its potential so far. We have just about 25% of renewables in heating and cooling today. We planned 38% of renewables in 2030 last year. Now with the new target, we need 47%. So think about the big change for which we have less than 10 years. Obviously, the reasons for this sector, for the potential in this sector not being realized are also clear. It's a market which is fragmented, which is regulated heavily by the member states, and that's why we see in some member states huge improvements in the last years, and then in other member states the efforts is flagging, and therefore we need a reinforced European framework. It was mentioned already that we have both the climate and energy legislation, which is pushing the deployment of renewable heat, and in particular of solar heat. That's the ETS for large installations, obviously. On the energy side, which I represent, you look mainly at the Renewable Energy Directive. A few years back, what did we have on heat in the Renewable Energy Directive? Nothing. Nothing specific on heat. Now, recently what we introduced in 2018 are indicative targets for renewable heat. In the revision that we put on the table last year, which is now being negotiated by the European Parliament and by the Commission, we go further. We turn this indicative target to in a large part to binding target for the member state. We add indicative benchmarks for buildings because obviously 60% of this energy demand for heating comes from buildings. And we also have another benchmark for industry, because this is where, again, and it was already said, the potential is pretty high. So you see that with each and every revision of the legislation, of the European legislation on the energy side, the framework is tightening. The Commissioner also mentioned a number of elements related to buildings. This is where another directive kicks in, the European Performance of Buildings Directive. And there, again, a revision is on the table. And when you look at it, you see the zero emission buildings with basically renewable energy providing the heating and cooling needs there. You see a number of provisions related to phasing out of fossil fuel boilers, and basically with all we have on the table, including the repower, we see no more market for fossil fuel boilers by 2029, so that's in a few years' time. There are provisions related to subsidies to fossil fuel boilers. There are provisions related to promoting renewable energy heating. One more element that I wanted to mention is the solar rooftop obligation that is part of repower and will be introduced via the energy performance of buildings. So gradually, in the later part of this decade, going through different types of categories of buildings, we would like to see on each and every building, new building, and then it also includes existing ones, we would like to see solar energy. And it doesn't have to be obviously solar PVs, it can be as well solar heat. So these are just a few elements to complement what the Commissioner said on our regulatory framework. Summing up, if I may say, I see three areas on which we are focusing. One, the buildings, and here I would highlight the financing issue and the links with the energy efficiency improvements that we need to, that's the nut to crack in order to accelerate the deployment of renewable heat, of solar heat on buildings. We need to focus more on the city's dimension, and it was already said, the potential of the district heating and the solar heat and renewable heat in general in district heating systems. Clearly there can be efficiencies from this gained, and that's why we are further strengthening the framework here. And finally, the industry, I mentioned there is quite high untapped potential in the industry, but we also see an increasing interest in there. So the challenges are plenty. Policy, political challenges also related to the market development, but you see that we are growingly focusing on this part of the renewable energy. And summing up again, I would say the opportunity is there for the renewable and solar heat industry. The needs are high, the targets, so the demand-driven, the impulse on the demand side is there. We're working on it, and I think that you are in a pole position among the winners. You are to be among the winners of what is happening right now. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Łukasz. Thank you very much also for introducing the different elements and the different pieces of the puzzle that come to the picture, not only Repower EU and the Renewable Energy Directive, but also energy performance of buildings, EU solar rooftop strategy, and so on. And now if I turn to Guglielmo, because some of the targets that are outlined across EU policy seem to be clear and also at least fairly ambitious. I mean, not up to me to say, that's more up to the panel to say, but at least the ambition and the willingness is there. So my question to you is, do you think that these measures are giving a clear enough signal to the market? What would you say?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to give you a reply from the perspective of a company who has invested about 100 million euros in the last 12 years to develop a solar solution. So I guess that having collected all this and raised all these funds on the private equity market, this proves that investors are there believing that our solution can be viable, can grow, etc. I must say that I was not so much upset as Joachim was and not surprised from what the Commissioner said, because I think this is quite understandable that electrification is mainstream. We're going towards a huge energy transition, and from the perspective of a policymaker, I would rely on those who are really capable of mobilizing the huge resources that are necessary. And the electricity market and the power generation has proved over 100 years that they are capable of doing that. So it's up to us, and I want to take this opportunity that we are here for the first time after 3 years as a sector to say that if we have to find a place in this energy transition scenario that relies mostly on electrification, we need also to prove ourselves as worthy of such investment perspective. We have to demonstrate that solar thermal is not only a solution for very distributed small-scale activity, but and that is going to stay, of course, but that we are also capable of mobilizing infrastructure investment that require clear returns and reliable returns on investment. So to do this, we need the proper framework, and we, of course, are working in this direction. Because also the policymakers, they badly need us to do that. I mean, how can you imagine really in such a short time frame to decarbonize everything just by electrifying everything? Let me give you an example, a brief story that I witnessed just last week. I was invited to the workshop to present our solution to a very large corporation, global corporation with industrial sites all over the world. And they had, and this company, they had a clear vision. It's even worse. No, it's me probably, because whenever I touch it, I can't support it. Wait. No, I don't think so. Hello. Now, so we shout, maybe you can Hello. It works. Okay, that's perfect. So with two ice cream, I can talk to you. So this very large company has very clear idea about what kind of investment they have to do to decarbonize their industrial process. And they start with energy efficiency. Who can debate that? It's the cheapest and the immediate one. And the second layer was electrification and heat pumps. And then, of course, going up, there was also solar thermal. Can you imagine that? And geothermal. So I have to say that heat pumps, for them, so electrification is a synonym of decarbonization. It is not true, but this is the perception that they get. And I am sorry to say, they get it also because of the message that policymakers are setting up. That electrification is a solution for decarbonization. It will be once you decarbonize all electricity generation. And it's a big job. And to be honest, we are very late in doing that. So can you imagine today, all the renewable electricity going in the network is about, I don't know, 25, 29%. And most of it is hydroelectric, which means they have no expansion capabilities in hydroelectric. So it means that just to decarbonize the electricity consumption, you need like to multiply 10 times the non-conventional electrical power generation, renewable. And then if you want to add to this mobility, then it becomes 20. If you want to add heat, it becomes even more. So who is doing all of these? Well, the commissioner said, so I don't know, 300 gigawatt. So to do this huge job, I mean, you need all the help you can get. And we are here to help. This is my message here. So we want to reduce as much as possible the need to build very large generation infrastructure. Because be honest, you don't want to put windmills all over the coasts of the Mediterranean just to feed one single grid. And so it's important that whatever solution, including solar thermal, is applied as much as possible. And I said, we have to do our part. Because our clients are not prepared to invest massively in solar thermal, as they are not prepared to invest in photovoltaic or in windmills. Our client, they have to produce their stuff, okay, being toys or chemical products or whatever. So the reality is they want to buy our energy as much as they buy gas. And going back to the example that I gave you a few minutes ago about this large corporation, we are talking a lot, and their goal is to go zero emission on electricity by 2025 and go net zero by 2030, but doing what? In the end, the only project they had financed already was a gas regeneration project. So let me tell you clearly, the message is not going through. They still rely on gas as the cheapest and most decarbonized source. And it doesn't matter, unfortunately, there's a war in Ukraine, and I don't know, the carbon price is going up, etc. They still hope today that things will get back to normal and they will be able to purchase from the network cheap gas. So unless they have a clear signal from the policymakers that this thing cannot go on, and I mean, the commissioner said we're going to phase out old boilers. Nobody's using boilers. Everybody uses cogeneration to produce heat. So, oh well, let me tell you, my clients at least, okay, the efficient company, they have to go zero, they use cogeneration. And the cogeneration is not even their own. Typically, there is an energy service company that provides them with cogeneration, with long-term contracts. So, to be honest, the reality on the field, when you talk to clients, is that they have long-term commitments on cogeneration energy production with companies. They have, for example, subsidies on cogeneration that will last for at least another 5 years. Do you think they're going to scrap that? They won't. So, it is very important that the messages are more clear, that there is no way out of this. Otherwise, the adopters are just taking more time and hoping that everything will get back to normal without them having to invent or to adopt new solutions. So the real message is we need to make this very clear, more clear, and to support them in this transition. And of course, I agree that electrification is going to be the base load, as today the base load is gas. But you need to give more space to solar thermal. And we, in solar thermal, we need to prove to policymakers that we can do as well as the electricity generation people.
Super, thank you very much. Okay, the two of them seem to be working, so I'm going to stick to one for the minute. Let's see how long does that last. So thank you very much, Guglielmo, for I believe like introducing this on the ground, so to say, perspective from what is needed for in terms of investments for big corporations to make that shift, right? So now I'd like to turn to Sanjeev from the Renewable Heating and Cooling Alliance. So as we were talking about it, so heat represents almost half of Europe's energy demand, which is it should be at least very much at the center of the discussion. So to which extent do you think that the measures in place and those proposed are helping this very pressing energy security problem?
Thank you very much. I hope this is working. Firstly, happy birthday. Congratulations to Pedro and the team for organising this really difficult lesson. Once again, thank you all for coming out. So what's going to be quite a fun discussion. Before I respond to your question, I really want to pick up the sentiment that Jorgen said in response to Ms. Simpson's speech. I think one of the issues in the world of renewable heating and cooling is visibility. We will hear regulators all over the world say, yes, we need to have more renewables, or yes, we need to have more wind, we need to have more PV, and they will forget everybody else. Now, if you're serious about the decarbonisation story, every other technology is equally important. Solar thermal has to have the same visibility that PV has, that wind has, that hydrogen has, so that we actually generally decarbonise. That lack of political visibility is one of the key things that's holding back investments in renewable heating and cooling. And until we address that, we're always going to be missing our objectives, and we're always going to be trying to catch up and having wonderful speeches from Guillermo saying, come on guys, you know, the system is broken and we're shouting as loud as we can. At some stage, the regulators have to start listening. They have to be open to listening. That's the first point I want to make. The second point is that whilst there is a lot of really, really good things that have happened in the policy framework, in the original Fit for 55 Renewable Energy Directive and the follow-up amendments that were made to, through Repower Europe, there are still some things where that equality of treatment is completely different. Now, let me give you an example to illustrate this. We have, through the Repower Europe, a hydrogen accelerator. All the regulatory effort of the European Commission, together with industry, together with member states, is going to be managed by a European system to drive investment, to smooth out the regulatory framework, to ensure that the right shapes of financial products and direct and indirect investment support is provided to the hydrogen sector. The question you have to ask yourself is, if heat is so important, why wasn't there a similar accelerator for renewable heating and cooling? If we're serious about renewable heating and cooling being half of the problem, and actually, as Lucas mentioned, it's fragmented, and in some cases member states are quite advanced, and in other cases member states have no idea what to do. That's clearly a policy failure. And what I would say is that the biggest policy failure that we have underlying all of this is the conflict between the Renewable Energy Directive and the two directives that were proposed for gas. So whilst we're talking about increasing investments in heating and cooling, Article 23 of the Renewable Energy Directive, which is, as Lucas mentioned, a new thing. This came about because your community, together with other renewable heating communities, forced this on the agenda. So this is your success. But what it doesn't have is the equal attention that is given to the gas industry, where the gas proposal that we have today it was proposed in December. So on the eve of the invasion of Ukraine, in the middle of an energy crisis, we have a gas package that's only talking about competition between gas suppliers, not between renewable heating and cooling and energy efficiency being integrated into the gas consumption. Now, under the last commission with the electricity market reform, that was the central basis of the reform, to integrate renewables and energy efficiency into the electricity market. That's why PV and wind are leading so much, because they've had that dedicated integration with the fossil producers. That's the thing that's missing from our policy discussion and our regulatory design at the moment. And in essence, that's the thing that we need to fix. On top of that, the very first piece of legislation that has been agreed under the umbrella of Fit for 55 was the Trans-European Networks for Energy. This is the funding piece for the big infrastructure for power generation, but also for gas and oil. Now, you, together with the Renewable Heating and Cooling Alliance, worked very hard to put renewable district heating and cooling systems in that framework. So they too can get the same type of funding that the gas transmission system gets, which then benefits the gas distribution system, which is why gas is so cheap when it comes to renewable heating and cooling, because all of their upfront costs are subsidised by the public purse. Yet when it comes to making an investment choice, we ask poor consumers to decide between me making my own choices, me claiming my own subsidies, against the European Union, member states, industry designing the whole fossil system and paying for the whole fossil system. And then we also have to pay on top for the infrastructure costs there. So that's a fundamental problem. This is why we need to move from an internal market for gas to an internal market for heat, so that we generally give heat the same priority that electricity has. Then we start to solve a lot of our political problems. Then the optics start to become much clearer. Then hopefully Ms. Simpson will not be able to confuse solar thermal with solar PV on the birthday of solar thermal. Now let me go back and respond to your question. I realise I'm going around on quite a few things. The package that we have proposed is not bad. The problem is that we have to have something that's very good in order to give the investment signals for rapid investment in renewable heating and cooling, in solar thermal, but also within the district heating and cooling system, so that they are then incentivized at a much greater pace to make the investments. So there's a couple of things that are good and there are a couple of things that are missing. And I'm going to talk about the things that are missing so we can have a debate about them. The first thing is there's always a risk element when it comes to making an infrastructure investment. The Commission has actually, to their credit, proposed that Member States should have risk frameworks. This is in Article 23 of the Commission's proposal, but it's an option for Member States. The problem is that if you leave it as an option for Member States, you end up with the same situation that Lucas described. The Member States that know this will do it, but virtually everybody else will do nothing. And in order to get large capex-intensive investments off the ground, you need to have a de-risking framework that's a bit more centralised. And this is one of the key things that we as an alliance have been advocating for, and it's a crucial thing to getting large-scale capital-intensive investment quickly. If you de-risk it, the private sector has a tendency to crowd in whenever there's that level of de-risking. The second thing is the focus on planning. Now, when we're talking about large-scale heat decarbonisation for renewable heating and cooling systems, a lot of these are planned by local authorities. Local authorities are the ones who are going to, design, hopefully using local renewable heating and cooling resources, what's the most optimal system combining the best combination of renewable heating and cooling solutions and infrastructure to serve the needs of their people. That's a good thing. The problem is that when we talk to these local authorities, a lot of the time they are competing against gas distribution system operators who see a decrease in their market share as more and more renewables come online. Now, the gas distribution operator legislation is in the gas directive, for which they have no requirement whatsoever to factor in any renewable heating and cooling investments. But if they were to do it, all of a sudden our technologies would be classified as infrastructure, and therefore considerably cheaper, considerably sped up in terms of their integration into the system. And that's something that we need to combine together to fix, because the window is still open for us to reform the DSO element of the gas package. And that's where I think as a community we all need to come together and influence, because if we win that, then all of a sudden we become mainstream. And we have to become mainstream if we're serious about climate, if we're serious about the energy crisis, and let's be honest, if we're serious about the industrial decarbonisation piece. One of the things I haven't heard a lot of attention about is the vital contribution that renewable heating and cooling makes to industry, because it's drowned out by hydrogen. And actually what it needs to do is to say, well, actually low to medium temperature heating needs to be earmarked for renewable heating and cooling, because that's the range that we and our technologies can deliver. We need the same support as the hydrogen accelerator to make sure that we support industry in that decarbonisation. I'll stop there, thanks.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev, also for introducing this missing element that I believe we could also discuss in these few minutes that we have left. If I could turn back shortly to you, Lucas, because I would want to give you the chance to possibly react to any of the comments from your panelists. And also, I think it would be interesting for us to understand in terms of timing from the different proposals. I mean, it seems that there's really a sense of urgency really to act to scale up and heat decarbonisation. So, which challenges do you see in the implementation of the timely implementation of these measures?
Thanks. Maybe just, does it work? Yeah, it works here. Just a few points, and thank you very much for these comments. And in a sense, I do see where you're coming from, and I see the conclusion. I try to be clearer on how we are building the incentive or a regulatory framework which is providing stimulus to renewable and in particular solar heat. But just a couple of comments. indeed, electrification is a trend, and we cannot ignore it. And I hear your comment, and I take note of it, that you consider that there might not be level playing field between the renewable heat technologies and renewable power technologies. At the same time, what I try to show is that this framework for heat, first, it's been catching up with a framework for power, and it is getting stronger and stronger. And now I think we need to indeed get to your question, which is what's the timing, you know, when can we count on these proposals? I mean, we were really hurrying with the proposals already last year, July 2021, and then with the amendments increasing the ambition for renewables this year in May. Now it's in the hands of the Council and so the Member States and the European Parliament. It's been almost a year since we have put on the table the proposal. The examination, obviously, in the two institutions have started, but have they started to negotiate between themselves? No. Do I see that in both institutions there is the understanding for going as far as the Commission proposes or even further? No, I don't see that. So I believe there is obviously space for you to make your message heard, now in particular among the Member States and in the Parliament, who will decide on the final shape of what we put on the table. We hope as the Commission that the negotiations will start basically early in the second half of the year, negotiations between the Parliament and the Council, and we hope that they will be concluded still this year. But will they? It's not in our hands.
Sure. Thank you very much, Łukasz. And I think a lot of us are taking note that we can still somehow influence the outcomes of the negotiations with policymakers and with member states. So maybe to follow up on that, I think it would be interesting to ask Sanjeev, how do you see the willingness of the Parliament and of the Council to increase the targets and to bring a more ambitious proposal?
What a perfect question. Well, look, let's go back, and we get the best indication we have of where the European Parliament sits is the vote in the European Parliament's Environment Committee on the Renewable Energy Directive. The competence is with the Energy Committee, but this gives you an indication of, what the mood music is like. Now, when it comes to the renewable heating and cooling target, this is Article 23 of the Renewable Energy Directive, the bit that's driving our market. What we saw there is that the Parliament was much, much more progressive than the Commission's position. This seems to be an issue that's intuitively understood. And they asked for a much higher binding target than the Commission proposed. Okay, fair enough. We still have to see where the Council is, and Member States don't like targets, they don't like the word binding, and that's really where we, as a community, have to thank the Commission for at least giving us a binding target to fight over. This is something we as a community have wanted for a long, long time. We have it, it's not the right number, we can always fix the number later, but that seems to be programmed in. What we need to make sure is the Council doesn't row back on that. That's our job. Where there are still issues that are missing from this debate is around actually quite important areas where renewable heating and cooling technologies are combined can actually play quite a pivotal role, and that's in things like heat storage, for example. Now, for those who are not, you're all familiar with the heat market. I don't need to say anything to you. But this increasingly becomes one of the sticks that's used against going towards a greater penetrations of renewable heating and cooling because of the peak heat demand. Now, if you combine, if you look at the pamphlet that you can see outside, you'll see that when it comes to thermal storage, the contribution of solar thermal can be, up to 60%. If you combine that with other renewable heating technologies, some that provide base load, some that can help with the top up, we can actually address the peak heat demand issue as long as it's planned well. So the real question then is how do we design ownership to do the planning that's required to address these issues? Now, this is something where legislation can't fill the gap, but what it can do is it can appoint somebody to take responsibility for the issue. Now, if you take other parts of the energy system, you have DSOs, distribution system operators. They are legally responsible for managing their part of the system. What we need to do is just to find out whether this goes in the, it should go in the gas DSO and the electricity DSO, but there should be a renewable heat storage mandate on those system operators. That's the thing that's going to lock in investment. That's the thing that's going to de-risk the capital and actually allow that market to grow out. That's the kind of things that we need to do. It's missing from the framework at the moment, but it's the kind of thing we need to put in. The other interesting thing that's included within the framework discussions at the moment is quite a healthy conversation around skills. We need people. We are, this is a market that's going to be one of the biggest and richest and most diverse parts of the clean technology world when we get to 2050. People are really important. We need people to do the designing. We need people to understand the regulation issues, the financial structures, but also the planning and the actual physical investments as well. That's something where the Commission has helped, but actually where the Parliament has gone so much more further in terms of looking at people who are qualified, people who are certified, making sure that there is skills and facilities to allow people to enter this sector across the EU. And if that doesn't happen, then this is really where the Commission is going to have to jump in, because this is the difference. This determines how quickly we make the investment. So it's a vital issue.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev. And if I may turn with one last question to Guglielmo before we wrap up the first panel, which has flown by really, really fast. I would like to ask you, which initiatives would you prioritize, and which of the elements we discussed would you prioritize to speed up the decarbonisation of heating in Europe? So in practice, what can really give the clear market signal that the industry is looking for?
Yeah, I will answer to you. Just briefly, I would like to comment about the level playing field that Lucas has put forward. So let's be very clear. I don't want the level playing field. I want more help than the electrification, because it's easy to help them when they are already winning and they are occupying all the market niches. It's important that we realize that we need to provide help to those who are worth it. And we believe that we are worth it, because our solution is ready now, not like hydrogen in 2040. It's capable of being deployed at larger scale from now on immediately, with high volumes of increase every year, and so we are worth it. But of course it doesn't help to put a lid on whatever we do and not talk about solar thermal in any possible occasion. Yesterday I was answering a survey from the Commission where everything was about only electricity. All renewables involved in this survey was only about electricity. Also, Solar Strategy had 2 questions on solar thermal, and all the other 20 questions were about electricity. So I'm just telling you this because putting such a bias also on information, it drives our counterparts, the adopters, the client, etc., to think about, okay, that is the default solution. We are going there. There is nothing else we have to do. So it doesn't help. So if there is someone who needs help, it's us, not the electrification. Renewable electricity has big, powerful corporations investing, deploying, trying to get hold of a huge market that is made of kilowatt hours. And we know that this is a real huge market, and there is a fight over it, of course, because we're talking trillions of euros. So now, to answer the other question, what can we do? We can be better. This is what we can do. In fact, I'd like to talk a very poetic argument: money. So money is important for our clients. If we are able to save them more money than another guy, they will choose us. And in the end, I think we really should trust the market forces to make decisions for themselves. And so, of course, we know what our numbers are. And we know that we can provide competitive energy to our clients and our adopters. Sometimes we're not just being considerate. We need to bring these solutions to the client with the help and the support of significant investors like, for example, the same gas companies that today are distributing gas all over Europe, they might be a strong vehicle for distributing solar thermal solutions as well. They are not even considering it, let's be clear. Some of them, they do spot projects, but this is not enough to let the awareness grow among in the market that we can provide good solutions. So, just not to keep complaining all the time. I said, we have to do our part, we have to be competitive, we are going to be competitive, we just need the support necessary to build credibility about a solution that from the technical standpoint has nothing to prove.
Thank you very much, Guglielmo. I'm aware that I may have eaten a few minutes from the coffee break, but I believe that all of us are quite energized after this first discussion. So if I can ask for a big round of applause for our speakers in this first a great scene setter for the discussion to come, and also the presentation of the roadmap for solar heat. So thank you very much to all of us, all of you, for being with us.
Okay, welcome. So before this second panel, where we're focusing more on solar heat and the contribution from solar heat, we will present our roadmap that we have launched officially last week with also with the communication campaign here based in Brussels. And I would like very much to introduce to you the main aspects of the roadmap, inviting you all to have a look so you can find it on your chairs and obviously also online. So, also to thank for the companies that are supporting, but also our members in general. So I will skip the introduction of the sector. I think the majority knows it rather well. But to stress that also in this roadmap we try to address the different segments, and you will see later. So we're talking about residential, commercial, industrial, and district heating. So the roadmap is part of a broader campaign which we'll call Solarized Heat, and the topic comes also from there. So the idea that we can do much more to energize Europe using solar heat as a solution. One of the aspects we want to stress is how much solar thermal can contribute to the energy system. So we believe that by 2025 we can have a capacity of 57 gigawatt installed. 10 years later, as mentioned already before, and with the right measures in place, we can reach 500 gigawatts of installed capacity, and by 2050, 2,000 gigawatts. One of the important differences is that residential, which is our main segment today, will be overtaken in that role by solar heat for industrial processes. So all the segments will increase considerably, but the one growing the most will be the industrial segment, with district heating also with an important, but though more, to some point, more limited deployment. This is also in line with projections that can be seen from IRENA and from IEA in some of their scenarios. And we believe that, as said, with the right measures in place and focusing a bit more on the short term, this is fully achievable. Looking a bit closer to 2030, so the estimation is to have 140 gigawatts of capacity in operation. Just to stress that this could represent, together with the installed capacity and energy savings, this could represent a total savings of 125 terawatt hours. That there will be 21 million solar thermal systems in buildings. And one point that we also want to stress, because it's essential for the energy system, is that in terms of storage capacity, and this storage included in every solar thermal system, this would lead to 750 gigawatt hours of thermal storage installed. In terms of jobs, 250,000 jobs will be linked directly and indirectly to the sector. Just to point out also because of in particular the main, one of the main topics discussed today, which is the energy security crisis, this could allow to the replacement of 12 billion cubic meters of gas supply. So, why, what kind of measures are we proposing? We will not go through all of them, but just to point out that we have a higher number of measures, demand-oriented measures. Supply-oriented measures are also relevant, but there is a lower number. And this is because one of the main constraints from the sector is not coming from the supply, is not coming from the capacity of the manufacturers, is coming mainly from the demand side. And this is one point that for us is important to see. We very much support the investment that is being done in renewables and in other solar technologies like solar PV, and in trying to have a renaissance of the PV industry in Europe. But we also want that the fact that we already have a leading solar thermal industry in Europe is more valued. And of course, to grow further is a challenge, but the sector already has the capacity to increase 3 times its production in the short term, and even to grow much more its capacity in terms of new production capacity. Depends from the companies. It can go from 6 to 18 months, the time that will be needed for new production plants, depending on the solar thermal technology we are talking about. So there is a large potential for the growth also of the manufacturing capacity, but it's mainly on the demand side. And we think that in terms of policymakers, they have many more instruments to address the demand side, to promote an increase on the uptake, an increase on the demand of solar thermal systems. And we would like to see that commitment as we see their commitment to address what are much more challenging barriers, which is related to the renaissance of the PV industry here, which we support. But if there is such a commitment which we applaud, then that commitment should also go for what is even easier with the instruments at hand, which is the increase of demand for solar thermal also. And this brings us to more immediate topics, which has to do also with, again, with the energy security and the climate crisis that need to be addressed. So as you know, the Commission has launched the REPowerEU initiative, the REPowerEU plan, to address this energy security crisis and to find alternatives. So in some parts, to find different gas supplies, but also to promote a stronger uptake of renewables. And within the initiatives of REPowerEU, there are 4 initiatives that we would like to highlight, which are also quite important for our sector. So permitting, the go-to areas, the solar rooftop initiative, and skilled workforce. Starting with permitting, so this is one of a big challenge we have to deal with in our sector as other renewable sectors when we are talking about large projects, but even when we're talking about residential projects, so in terms of rooftop. Focusing on the large scale, the capacity for fast deployment is very much limited to permitting. And just to give an example from one of the solar thermal projects that is now being developed, out of 28 months of implementation calendar, the part related to permitting takes 24 months. Of course, there are additional work that is done in parallel to this permitting, but it's too much of a burden, and in terms of timing, it really limits the additional deployment. So we very much support initiatives that are already being put in place. What we want to stress regarding permitting is the message we have in many other things, is that heat is off. When we're talking about permitting, we need to look to renewable heat, we need to look to solar heat, as we do look for wind power, for instance, which is one of the main targets of this permitting initiative. So we need also to make it reflected for the heat sector and solar heat. The other one are the go-to areas, and here we want to stress the question related to go-to areas in urban spaces. This is also referred in Repower EU and an initiative on permitting from the European Commission and their proposals already for amending the existing directives. So this is an essential aspect. To give example, this solar district heating, we need to be able to set our solar thermal plants close enough to the district heating network, so to allow the connection, to allow the use of solar heat in those networks. But for industry, it's a similar question. The same will also happen in rooftops. So these different aspects are foreseen in the permitting from the rooftops to urban areas, but we need to stress that aspect and not that the emphasis go only to the power supply. So we also need to remember also on this aspect that heat is off. Solar rooftop initiative. So this is one of the most propagated initiatives and is obviously quite relevant. Here, and we already had a discussion earlier today, there is a question that this initiative is covering both solar PV and solar thermal. Though the narrative and sometimes the communication is not fully clear, even from the Commission side, and many times this is interpreted as being focused on solar PV. That's not the case. The actual proposals for amendment are referring to solar technology, so it's covering both. And we want to point out that there is a huge potential for solar thermal, just within this initiative. Just to give an example, IEA in their net zero by 2050 scenario foresees that by 2050 there will be 1.2 billion households with solar thermal. In comparison, they foresee 400 million households with solar PV. So 3 times more deployment of solar thermal per household globally. Okay, there is another point I want to stress. It's also important to think of the energy density. And solar thermal has 3 times more density than solar PV. So when we're talking about limited area in the cities, in the rooftops, we can get much more energy if we are using solar thermal on the rooftop or PVT, so PV and thermal hybrid collectors. This is quite an important aspect to take into account. So the question of energy density and the fact that we can get more for the same area with solutions that have the thermal dimension, so solar thermal or PV thermal collectors. With this, we believe that the Commission has included targets for photovoltaics for the solar rooftop initiative. We add the solar thermal part, where we think by 2025, solar thermal can add 9 terawatt hours in terms of generation capacity in heat. But on top of that, and again, to add thermal energy storage capacity, and this will be equivalent to 60 gigawatt hours of thermal storage. Very important, it was also referred previously, an essential aspect, which was one of the main challenges we have ahead of us, which is the skilled workforce. So we need to work on the training, qualification, and certification of workers. This goes from manufacturing to installing to maintenance and other functions. We need to put in place initiatives and a strong cooperation within industry and even within the different sectors, in particular renewable heat, but also with solar PV. So we share very much the same target group in terms of installers, and we can also do much more if we have a modular approach to training. What we mean with this is that someone with a competence in roofing can do solar thermal and solar PV. If they add hydraulics to that, and electricity, they can also do, for instance, heat pumps or other technology. So a modular approach allows installers that already cover one technology to add additional technologies without having to do the full training, but just the required parts. And one essential aspect, we lack competencies at local level. We also lack at national level, in national authorities. This is obvious. We face very much this issue, the fact that they have competencies at national level, as happens in Brussels, to tackle electricity and gas, where they have a regulatory job, means that they have staff, they have the human resources, the expertise, and the regulatory tools to intervene on those areas. With heat, that's not so much the case. So we need more people dealing with heat at national level. But at local level, they will be essential, because they will be essential to put in place the programs to support citizens to do their transformation, the decarbonization of their heating systems. They will be essential in the support to the training of the installers. So this skilled workforce also in public authorities is essential. And with this, to finalize, just to stress that two messages that we want everyone to remember. First one is that heat is half, and the second one, that we can do much more to solarize heat. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Pedro. Thank you very much. We're kicking off now the second panel based on the presentation of the solar heat roadmap. We have the roadmap, but what is needed to get there is probably one of the questions that we intend to address in this last session of this high-level event for Solar Heat Europe. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers from my left to my right. We have first Bernard Respaud. He's the CEO of the European Copper Institute. We also have Aurélie Beauvais. She's the Managing Director of Euroheat and Power. Joachim Bistrom, the CEO of Absolicon. We've already met you in your introductory remarks earlier this afternoon. And last but not least, Harald Drück, head of R&D at the IGTE, the University of Stuttgart. So thank you very much to all of you for being with us this afternoon. We were also meant to have with us Jari Varjotie, the CEO of Savo Solar in Finland, but unfortunately, once again, because of the strike, he wasn't able to join us in this debate. So, if I may start with Bernard, representing the European Copper Institute. We're now hearing a lot of concerns, I believe, about the sustainability of the materials and the components essential for the energy transition. So, I'd be interested to hear from you the thoughts and the answers from the copper sector. And to which extent do you think the circularity component is an enabler or a hurdle to the energy transition?
It works. Thank you very much. Yes, sustainability and the role of copper into this energy transition. We serve quite a broad range of applications which do contribute to the energy transition. Of course, we produce the copper tubes that you need for your solar thermal applications, and we do bring there a material with a very high thermal conductivity, but also a very high corrosion resistance. But we also intervene in the manufacturing of windmills, electric cars, heat pumps, you name it. So we are actually an industry that represents, we've just done the exercise, we represent less than 0.5% of the CO2 emissions. But we do contribute, by being a key raw material for all these applications, we do contribute to about 2/3 of the abatement of the global greenhouse gas emissions. It doesn't, of course, make this the excuse that we only represent 0.5% of the greenhouse gas emissions, that we do nothing. No, on the contrary, we do care about sustainability in the copper industry, and we are currently finalizing a global copper decarbonization roadmap. I'm the happy leader of that exercise, where we look at how we can, by 2050, get to our contribution to climate neutrality by being a climate neutral production sector for a key raw material for the energy transition. But we've also started from 2005, we have started measuring the sustainability impact of the copper industry. So we do gather through our membership data on the impact of our production on the environment. It's not only the global warming potential, but it's also impact on the water, on the air quality, etc. And we do this through a life cycle assessment methodology, and we do refresh these data on a very regular basis. We have also initiated 2 years ago a voluntary assurance program called the Copper Mark, where we looked at 34 impact potential of copper on the sustainability matters on all these categories, and we are inviting all copper producers to subscribe to the Copper Mark, which is a voluntary assurance mechanism by which you get the Copper Mark after an audit, on which audit will go on assessing how you cope with sustainability, how sustainable is your production. So we're going to soon be out, hopefully September, October this year, with a decarbonisation roadmap for our industry. So we're happy to see that also other sectors are going this route, which is crucial. But also, of course, we do want to contribute to sustainability through the recycling part, which is very important. And indeed, circular economy is an enabler of the transition. It's not a hurdle, but it's a difficult case because indeed you need to define what is circular economy. There are 114 different definitions around, so we're working on getting a clear definition there. And we are already in Europe the front runners of copper recycling, because on a worldwide basis it's about 30% of the copper demand which is met by recycled copper, but in Europe it's around 50%. So Europe is a front runner there. Is it possible to go to 100%? No, because copper life cycle, copper containing products have a life cycle on average of 30 years. So it's not like glass where after 7 months you can actually recycle the bottle. It's not like flat glass where you can recycle your windows after 20 years. No, for copper products, especially if it's a power cable which is in the ground, this is usually there for 100 years. So we don't have enough stock to recycle from to be able to meet the demand. And don't forget, the demand for copper is going up because of the energy transition. You need more windmills, you need more electric cars. This is all more copper. So this is not, recycling is not the silver bullet or the copper bullet for meeting the demand increase. But we're working on this, but there are also conditions, business systems that need to be developed to increase the recycling rate at end of life.
Thank you very much, Bernard, for this introduction, for setting the scene and letting us know that there's indeed like no copper bullet, but there's a lot that can be done from this point of view, and looking forward to the debate that will follow. So if I may now turn to Aurélie, when we see the Repower Europe plan, it refers, as with district heating, as one of the areas that needs to be further developed to reduce our dependency on gas and to essentially decarbonize heating, really. What are your sector's expectations regarding the implementation of the European Commission's plans?
Yes, it works. So yeah, thank you for the question, and hi everyone. It's a real pleasure to meet with the solar heat community today. So I'm sure when giving our feedback about the Repower EU, of course, I'm sure the initial gut feeling would be the same than what have been said earlier, for sure, that, for example, we're not entirely satisfied in the sense that the focus is still way too much on electricity and hydrogen. So I will not repeat what has been said, just to say that we agree. Although, if we want to look at the bright side, I think we can also acknowledge that there was a shift from March to May, thanks to the great job that probably our organization did also together behind the scenes. In terms of awareness, we have really seen stronger provisions regarding district heating. And that's very, very good news, because I would really add a hashtag to what you said earlier, Pedro. I would just say, heat works. And in fact, it seems that we need to be much more outspoken about that, about the fact that in various situations, if you want to drastically reduce fossil fuels, and in particular the demand of natural gas in the near term, you may as well switch to district heating networks, for example, or increase your deployment of solar heat, indeed. I think it was Agora Energiewende, and they made a quick assessment of how much you would gain in terms of natural gas if you were to expand and modernize district heating networks in the next 5 years only. And so in only 5 years, you reduce the structural demand of Europe for natural gas of 125 terawatt hour, which was the equivalent of 8% of what we import from Russia today. And there is no copper bullet, but cutting your demand by 8% in only 5 years is actually something that, well, deserves a bit of attention. So in this regard, we were pleased to see that we call for modernizing, expanding our networks, that we ask municipalities to have a closer look into the resources that we have. What we see also, remaining on the bright side, is that there will be a market push, notably when we hear the announcement when it comes to stronger eco-design, for example. It's no mystery here that for all of us here in this room, new gas boilers are no longer a thing, that the most inefficient heating appliances need to be phased out very quickly. So both looking at the expansion of our network and the phase out of the most inefficient heating solution, if it comes into life, we see that as an interesting market push for our technology. The third aspect, where we were pleased, although it's not enough, is definitely supply diversification. Because I think, and we were discussing it before a bit together with Sanjeev, but what is really missing, we feel, in our sector, and that the electricity sector had 10 years ago when they transitioned, is our supply diversification framework. Because when it comes to the district heating industry, we are super keen to use more renewable or sustainable sources like waste heat, where the potential in Europe is absolutely enormous. But where is our supply diversification framework? Like, the renewable heat is very specific. It's not like renewable electricity. You probably heard before, for geothermal, you need very strong de-risking tools. It's not the same then for wind and solar. For solar thermal, you may need also other aspects related to permitting or go-to area. And so indeed, it may not be a good idea to put renewable heat just in the renewables basket and thinking the same tools will work for us. So in this regard, the Fit for 55 is a good beginning, but certainly not everything that we need, and we would be really keen to have more in terms of strategy at European level. I will just finish on the fourth aspect, and I hope I keep the time, but just to say on financing, because indeed one of the key measures that was included in the Repower EU was this reopening of the recovery frameworks. And in this, indeed, you have district heating with renewable heat and waste heat, which are now incorporated into the eligible investments. And it may be too complex for such a short statement, so I will just say that the financing framework does not seem to be adapted to the heating needs. For example, in particular, the application of the do not significant harm principle, for us, can be a real headache in some countries. Because for district heating, you have a transitional period. And in particular, switching from individual gas boilers to a gas-powered heat network, for example, can help you reduce by 3 your demand of gas in the very near term. And once you've done that, and once you have your networks, and that's exactly how the Danes did it, you phase in resources that are available, geothermal, solar thermal, waste heat. So there is kind of a sequence of investment that is very different from what we see in the electricity sector and is not at all adapted to what we see in the current RRF frameworks. So a lot of work.
So Beverly, thank you very much. And also to shed a light on the promising aspects of Repower EU. It's clearly not enough, but we see that there's a shift there, and there's still a chance to influence that. So, if I may now turn to Joachim, because if we look at the different sectors that we've been discussing, industry plays an important role here, and the decarbonization of industry in particular. So, to which extent you are confident that solar thermal can provide a relevant contribution to this effort?
Well, I think first one should remember how enormous amount of heat that is used in industry and in district heating. And I usually take 3 examples. The first is to make 100 liters of beer, you burn 2 liters of diesel oil. Or to make one pair of jeans or 1 kilo of jeans cloth, people think that jeans are made by someone sewing with an electric sewing machine. But in reality, the cloth is needed to be heat treated, to be washed, to be dried. So for every kilo of jeans cloth, you burn 2 kilos of coal. So think of that when you go to buy clothes. That the weight that you carry the double weight in coal for making this textile. And my third example is tea. No one would imagine that your small tea bag would have an environmental impact, would it? But to make 1 ton of tea, you burn 5 tons of firewood. So all the forests around the tea factories have been cut, and they've been planting eucalyptus instead. So these are examples how all the things that we surround ourselves with that are produced by heat and not by electricity. And what we have been doing in Absolicon, we have developed solar concentrators to produce steam for those industries that I mentioned, the food and beverage industry, the textile industry, the tea industry. And we have been managing to talk to the 20 largest multinationals in the food and beverage industry. And when they do this analysis, they see that solar thermal is their solution. They don't see hydrogen, they don't see electrification as a way to produce beer or jeans or tea. So we feel a very good response there to our technology offer. But we lack the urgency and the money to invest in those systems. So I think what we heard here with supply diversification, that is one of the keys that I think the suppliers need to think more about, because it will take time for them to go 100% solar thermal. But to start with 20% in a district heating network or in a textile industry, that's a good step. And I think we in the sector, we are ready to do this. We are just waiting and waiting for those who are buying the heat to actually go from fossil to renewable.
Thank you very much. Now, if we're turning from industrial processes to buildings with Harald, now the European Commission also announced the Solar Rooftop Initiative, which we also talked about before. So to which extent do you think that this proposal can be decisive for the decarbonization of buildings in Europe, particularly for space and water heating?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this solar rooftop initiative was already introduced by Pedro Diaz, our General Secretary. And looking at the initiative, I would say in principle, we all appreciated this initiative. But if I say in principle, that means not in detail. And the main critical or the main challenging point I see is that it has to be implemented on national level. And I think it's clear, the Solar Rooftop Initiative, as it is presented by the Commission, as it was presented by Pedro Diaz, it's technology open. So, and I think the good thing is it's solar, so the term is mentioned also in the context to other renewables. This is already very good. But yeah, the question is how it will be implemented on national level. And this, I think, is the critical point. And for example, if we look, I'm coming from Germany, if we look at some German federal states where there are already solar obligations, then they are also called solar obligations. They are in some federal states already implemented. They are implemented on city level. Yeah, in most cases they are called something like solar obligations, but then if you look at the details, then in many cases it's more or less a PV obligation. Of course, to a certain extent it has to be technology open, so then it's done in a way that you have to install a PV panel, but if you are not able to, then you can also do a solar thermal, or if you have justified reasons. So there is a door opener, but it's clear from a first view it's a PV obligation. And I think if this also happens by the national implementation of the Solar Rooftop Initiative, it will not help our sector. That's the critical point, and I think this is also the point where we all have to be active in our member states to really influence the decision makers in a way that they implement this rooftop initiative in an appropriate way. So this, I think, is the challenging point. So the basis is very good, but I think the outcome is still open. This is one point, and then the other point is, I think, of course, it's only, or more or less, only relevant with regard to buildings, and what we have also heard with regard to district heating, with regard to industry. There are a lot of other sectors where a huge amount of heat is needed, and there, of course, this rooftop initiative is not that relevant, maybe for some industry complexes, but yeah, for sure not for district heating. So I think, yeah, in principle it's a good element, and I think we all have the possibility to design it in a way that it is positive for us.
Thank you very much, Harald, and thank you very much to all of you to set the scene with this introductory question. So I have a bit of a follow-up question for each one of you, and I would like to start again with Bernard, simply because we've been discussing all the different policy proposals and the policy framework ahead, and I think it would be interesting to hear from you, from the Repower EU proposal in particular. To which extent do you think that the targets laid out in the proposal are attainable?
That's indeed the $100 million question. Targets give a direction, and I would like to rebound on what Harald just said. In principle, it's okay to go there, but I think we need to focus on how to get there. As if you see, okay, from renewables, we want to go from 40 to 45 by 2030. Okay, fine. But the question is, how are we going to get there, and how do we cut the red tape? How do we make things easier? We spoke a lot about district heating, and there is indeed excess industrial heat. Some people say that's waste heat. No, this is where we need to recycle. This is where we need to use what is available. And we have an example. One copper producer in Hamburg has a smelter. The production of copper is exothermic, so we do produce excess heat, and this heat is now used for district heating in the Hamburg Hafen region, region of Hamburg. So that's where we need to. I would rather stress the how than being dogmatic on the targets, and that's where we need more help also from the policymakers. In terms of, again, make permitting easier, faster, so that we can implement these solutions and not wait. I've seen 24 months there for a solar farm, and for copper mine it can go up to 15 years. So let's cut the red tape, and also let's use instruments like eco-design to make sure that once a product gets to the end of life, it is easier to dismantle, it's easier to recuperate the materials, and we want to recuperate copper. Why? Because it is indefinitely recyclable. You can recycle copper 500 times, it will still have the same electrical and thermal conductivity properties. So we don't lose any quality, but you have to make it economic, you have to make it workable for the partners who do collect, dismantle, and then we can take it back into the furnaces to indeed have a lower carbon footprint also, because high-grade scrap copper emits quite a substantial lower amount of emissions than primary. So that's okay, but again, it's the how. Eco-design and easy regulations to make sure that there are business models in place to facilitate recycling, to facilitate circularity.
So thank you very much, Bernard. Now, Aurélie, back to you. One of the aspects in the debate that it's not mentioned that often is everything related to thermal energy storage. And I think I'd be curious to hear from you, how relevant do you think that large-scale solar thermal energy storage included in district heating networks can be for energy systems?
Yes, indeed. I mean, what to say except for very relevant from our perspective, at least. Here, I think it's the same. It's a bit the same problem that we're encountering. We were at a workshop from the Commission on thermal energy storage last Friday, and basically they announced that the whole discussion was to fill in a staff working document on storage that would be published somewhere in autumn 2022, and that the focus of this staff working document would be electricity storage, although they also wanted to see bits and pieces for thermal energy storage. And indeed, that's a bit puzzling when you look at the key advantages that you have related to this technology, not only when it comes to material use, not only when it comes to cost efficiency, because we clearly see that today this is the most cost-efficient option to store, and it also provides very interesting benefits in terms of long-term or seasonal storage, which you may not find in other type of storage technologies. And here as well, not to be misunderstood, again, the thing is, the challenge is so huge. Why are we picking some specific technologies or deciding to focus too much on some technologies when we actually are very lucky to have a spectrum of solutions, amongst which we have thermal energy storage, which is also a EU industrial flagship. And we kind of don't understand why it is not yet so much in the radar. So we need much more, also because thermal energy storage incentive framework are not at all the same than electric storage incentive framework. And we need to do everything at the same time if we really want to be serious about our climate and energy targets. So we need, capital, it's very capital intensive, we need de-risking tools, we need more demo projects, we need specific approach to permitting, at least that's what our companies tell us. And really in terms of renewable integration, I think that's something, I come from the renewable industry before, I spent 5 years in the solar sector. I think it's great that we're developing much more solar and wind. Then we also need to be honest at European level in the sense that we have not yet fully cracked the equation when it comes to making the most of the variability of renewables. And in particular, we see thermal energy storage booming in countries which have a lot of renewables. Why? Because when you get negative electricity pricing, it's actually very interesting to use this negative electricity price to fill up your e-boilers or activate your heat pumps. So yeah, there's a lot to be done here from our perspective.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Aurélie. Now, moving back to Joachim, when we talk about industrial processes, what do you think that can be done to encourage industrial companies to convert massively to renewable heat? And to which extent is really a quick or fast transition feasible?
Well, I think that some kind of a new renewable energy quota would be a good way. And it could be from the government side, but it could actually also be a commitment from a sector. And I'm looking at Euroheat and Power, and I think to have this commitment to do the diversification framework, if you voluntarily said that, okay, we try to diversify with 1% solar thermal, 1% district heated connected heat pumps, and you made a small bouquet of this, I think we would be very, very happy to receive that bouquet. And we could find some ways of cooperate around this. And when it comes to heat storages, I think the capacity and the potential here is much bigger than what the politicians and the energy agencies have understood. We were actually able to get a study from the Swedish Energy Agency on solar thermal and heat storages. And we used the energy agency used the data from Denmark, where the thermal heat storage is 200 times cheaper than electric storage, 200 times cheaper. And their result was that it would be profitable in the mid-2030 without subsidies to introduce 6 terawatt hours of solar thermal in Sweden and 5 terawatt hours of heat storages to store solar thermal, but also to store waste heat from industries and waste combustion. And I think this is what we will see when those technology mature and is used in the district heating network, that solar thermal can do half and the large-scale storage will take the other half.
Thanks a lot, Joachim. And now back to Harold. And when we talk about buildings, and another proposal that the European Commission representative Łukasz Koliński discussed before is the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. One of the concepts that it is introduced in there is the notion of zero carbon buildings. So, to which extent do you think that solar thermal can play a role in such buildings? And essentially having this concept in European legislation, which signal do you think that it gives?
Yeah, looking at this, you named it zero carbon buildings and the role of solar or solar thermal. I think, first of all, it's really excellent because what a building needs is heat and power. And we have both technologies. We have PV to provide the power. we have solar thermal to provide the heat. So this is already a very good solution. And now the question is, of course, how to define zero carbon. And this, I think, is the critical point. And the zero carbon, from a real objective point of view, has to be defined on an extremely short time basis. That means typically in the power sector you take something like 50 minutes where you measure peak power or whatever. And if you use that small time scale to define zero carbon, then it's appropriate. But it's not appropriate, for example, if you define it on an annual basis. That means, for example, if you install a PV system where you produce a lot of green electricity in the summer, where there is already enough green electricity available, and then you calculate the emissions that you have saved during the summer, and in the winter you use the electricity from the grid, which is to a huge extent still generated by coal and gas, related to a lot of CO2 emissions, and then you just sum up over the year. That means you subtract the emissions that you have saved in summer from the emissions that were caused in winter, and then if the result is zero, then you have a zero carbon building. According to my opinion, this is more or less bullshit. Because nothing is zero carbon. In the winter, the emissions were explored to the environment. They are still there. They are not extracted. So this is not zero carbon. So I think it's again the same with the solar rooftop initiative. The question is how it is implemented. And I think if it is implemented in an appropriate way, then it's an excellent solution. And I think we already elaborated these proposals I would say 10, 15 years ago with my colleagues Werner Weiss, Gerhard Streeper, who are here today, when we developed the concept of the solar active house. And this, I think, is also the important aspect because, and this leads back to what we just discussed before, the question of thermal storage. Because if you look at least at Central and Northern Europe, then the challenge is to store the heat from the summer to the winter for heating purposes. And on thermal basis, with thermal energy storage, this can be done perfectly, both in single buildings and even more efficient if we look at district heating grids. And so I think in principle the concept is excellent, but also the question is how it is implemented. And again, I think you all can contribute in your countries to a implementation that on one hand helps really the environment, so that means really zero emissions and not zero emissions over an annual basis, and on the other hand that helps our sector because then you need solar thermal energy and you need thermal energy storage.
But yes, we also treat PV and solar thermal as there is zero CO2, or batteries. There also seem to be zero CO2 when you manufacture them. But when you do a life cycle analysis, you see that the PV have 30, 40 gram per kilowatt hour. And even that might be difficult to afford in the climate budget that we are looking at. Also, solar thermal have some CO2 emissions, which we need to reduce the ingoing material. So we are treating renewables as a 0, 0, 0, but that's not really the fact. And when it comes to heat storages, the thermal heat storages, there are thousands and thousands and thousands times lower CO2 emissions than the batteries.
Exactly, this was the point that I would like to add. I think it's not only a question about the energy generations, it's also a question about the energy storage. And I think this is an extremely relevant point if we look at this life cycle assessment. And there we had a discussion about copper and the recycling of copper. And I think I would say everybody, it's clear that even in 100 or 200 years, the electric cables will be made out of copper because copper has excellent electrical properties. It also has excellent thermal properties for solar thermal collectors. That means also absorbers will for sure be made in 50 or 100 years out of copper. But what is completely unsure is if the next or the future generations of electric energy storage will be made out of lithium or another technology. And then the question about the ecological footprint is completely different, because then the recycling is not available anymore, or does not make sense. And I think this is also a very important aspect that has to be taken into account.
Excellent, thanks a lot. I don't know if Bernard, Aurélie, you would also like to react to either this or other statements that have been said?
Just to underline indeed the need to have the right measurement of what is the carbon footprint. This is one of the conclusions of the global copper decarbonization roadmap we are building now. It's one of the first actions we're going to take as an industry is we're going to have a harmonization, a guidance on how do you measure the carbon footprint. Because what's in scope 3? Where do you stop? What's your perimeter? How do you allocate emissions to co-products? Because when you produce copper, you produce silver, you produce gold, you produce sulfuric acid, etc. So all these needs to be addressed, because otherwise it's a race forward without really having a common ground on what is the carbon footprint, and then it becomes greenwashing, because then it becomes a competitive advantage. So it's indeed pretty important. And indeed on the recycling, I'm happy to hear confirmation that, well, in 100 years, copper will still be there because of the properties, which are, again, properties you don't lose by recycling. But then that's why it's very important to facilitate this recycling as far as possible. And again, there is a technical limitation that will not enable us to meet demand with 100% of recycled copper. But let's put this as far as possible, and that's where all the sectors need to work together. That's back to the eco-design, that's back to the recycling collection models at end of life. When you dismantle a building, when you dismantle a solar panel, make sure that you recuperate this so that it can go back into the loop and make this economical.
Yes, maybe just a quick comment, which is, I guess, on this very important question. Yes, we absolutely need to get our boots straight when it comes to calculating the carbon footprint for technologies. I fully agree. We don't have a level playing field for that in between technologies in the way this is being addressed today in Europe, whether it's between fossil and renewables, whether it's between renewables themselves. I think here, though, we need also to be clear, there is no climate neutral solution. And so in this regard, I'm not sure to which extent this discussion is the discussion we should have in between ourselves, because I think we should not be shooting at each other in between technologies. I need to defend my former colleagues for wind and solar in that we have been looking at the data back then. Yes, they are not climate neutral, but honestly, if we look at the comparison between other sources, like nuclear, like coal, like gas, we're not at all talking about the same scales. So I think we also need to keep our house in order and to understand that we're all on the same side, at least when it comes to the big renewable community. And we'd rather be working on the complementarity of our solutions together, leaving the CO2 discussion to the really dirty sources, and at the same time putting the methodology right.
I can allow for 1 up to 2 quick reactions from the panel, if anyone's up for a final remark. Joachim, please.
What do you say? Shitting in the house. No, sorry. But I think that this diversification in the district heating, what is moving now is both using more biofuel and using more waste combustion. And both those two are questionable from a life cycle perspective in a little longer run. So I would really wish for the district heating community to really step up behind the solar thermal.
Please, go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. You're very, very lucky, because at this moment we are combining our 2050 scenarios. And we have surveyed 10 of our members, 10 of our countries, to have a look at how their district heating and cooling networks were looking in 2050. And I have to say that what you said just now was wrong, in fact. So when we look at the new projections for the future demand, we're not talking about waste combustion. We're talking about waste heat. It's really different. So basically, a lot of industries are going to still be there, or we really hope that our industries will still be there in 2050, and they will emit a lot of heats. And I can name 2 areas which are specifically promising for our sector. One is data centers. Today, you already have a lot of projects with cities, okay, small cities, but cities heated with that data center heat recovery. And hydrogen production, although we may not be fully keen on hydrogen here in this room, I can tell you that from the district heating industry, the heat recovery potential are enormous. So there will be a change in that. And when it comes to the renewables, it will be the biggest share of our supply. And we very much look into, 4 ways to use it, basically directly, of course, with sustainable biomass, and I insist on the sustainable, geothermal, big time, solar thermal for sure, also when it comes to thermal energy storage, and through heat pumps, because I think there is also one thing we need to put out of this debate, which is that heat and electrification can actually be complementary. The same way that you can have a building that is heated with district heating and have a residential solar thermal or a residential heat pump. We see that happening in Finland or Sweden. So, the complementarity is really the key here, and I can reassure you that we hope to work very, very closely with Solar Heat Europe in order to see how we can increase the share of solar heat in our networks.
Thank you very much, Aurélie. And I believe that the conversation has also gone by really quick, but the silver lining is that since we have a roadmap ahead, we're going to have the opportunity to continue discussing these developments further. And then from this point of view, it's great to be reuniting this community at the high-level event. So thank you very much to all of our speakers, to Bernard, to Aurélie, to Joachim, and to Harold for joining us this afternoon. If I can ask for a big round of applause to all of them. All right, so it's time to wrap up the event. And for that, I would like to welcome on stage again Guglielmo Cioni, this time in his capacity as Vice President of Solar Heat Europe.
Hello. Yes, it worked for Pedro and for me too. Yes. I have noticed one thing during this afternoon. Is that, this is 30 years, solar thermal, but we didn't speak too much about solar thermal. And it was really a conversation about all sorts of options in the energy transition. And I think this is a good thing, that we just didn't look at our belly, and we really try to see how do we fit really best in this energy transition scenario. This scenario is not yet settled. Things are happening right now. It's important that we qualify as a player who is worthy of the support of the policymakers, of the Commission, of the member states, but also that is capable to aggregate the interest of our final users. Because basically they are the market, and the market is so powerful that you cannot simply issue regulations and create a market. So what we really hope we have learned today is that there is a place for us, and it's important because we will be able to make things happen while a lot of different other players are promising things, and we don't know if this will really happen. And don't make me make names, but of course hydrogen is one of them. Carbon capture is one of them. So, the fact that we are here talking with the final users, the district heating, the industrials, etc., is very important. But of course, we should not just be happy about that. We need to acknowledge not only where we stand, we have a strong track record, demonstrated technology, proven, competitive, etc., but we need to know where we are going. And it's clear to me from the presence in this hall that we are still too few. And the interest around, and I mean the economic interest around solar thermal needs to grow dramatically. And so I mentioned this morning, we've been raising money as a company. We need to raise money as a sector. And to do so, we need to implement and to demonstrate large projects, because let's be clear, it's not like electricity is there because somebody supported it, but because they demonstrated a lot. Renewable electricity has been capable of proving itself worthy of investment. And this is, I believe, what we really need to do. But of course, it's not just me or my competitor or Green One Tech or Absolicon. We cannot do it alone. We really have to do it together. And together with other players that today are not involved in the conversation. I mean, it's not enough to produce panels. It's not enough to develop projects. We have to do really this all together. And there are a lot of important categories of players out there that are not involved yet or not enough in our value proposition. And I mean the project developers, the EPCs, the infrastructure funds, the energy service companies. All of these are the ones that will qualify the solar thermal solution as something that is worth investing in. And so we really need to work together to attract them to this forum. Because in Europe, in Brussels, this is where big decisions are really taken and then transferred to the national level. And it cannot be done only in one place or the other. It has to be done in both places. So, of course, I mean, there are competitors among us, but there are also integrators. And with them, we really need to bring the message outside to convince our clients, our future clients, to invest more and more in this technology because it's in their interest and in their advantage. So what we have to do, of course, we need to drive down cost, but I mean, not only on the manufacturing side, we need to drive down cost in the development of new projects, in the implementation of new projects, in reducing the red tape, in helping the clients. I mean, I was really pleasantly surprised to see that there are companies among ourselves that are really taking care not only of the product that they do, but also the way they want to integrate their energy in the client's actual needs. This part has been widely not taken care enough. I really believe that when we go to our adopters, they feel that they are not being listened enough. And this is a message I want to put out there. They want us to understand their problems and to design our solutions for them to be as simple as possible to use. So I won't make it any longer than this. Of course, I didn't mention all the important and stimulating messages that we got here, but I believe that if we work all together, then a first objective, a first goal can be achieved, and it was pointed out this morning too, this afternoon too, is to be noticed more. We really need to qualify ourselves as a separate and important component of the energy transition, apart from electricity, apart from renewable energy. They are needed, renewable electricity is needed, but we are there to support them with a growing share as much as we are capable of making it competitive and easy to implement. So I really wish that you have found this really informative and interesting, and we can get together once again next year, because I want to celebrate this way also the 31st, the 32nd, and the 33rd anniversary of Solar Heat Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And with this, we are wrapping up this high-level event by Solar Heat Europe. I believe that indeed we've had many stimulating conversations and many messages to take out of it, not the least that we need to continue raising our voices. So I'm going to leave it here. Just a couple of housekeeping rules in terms of how to proceed. I believe that a lot of you will want to continue the conversation outside the network, and there is opportunity to do so. But we would kindly ask you to move to the room next to, like in front of us, where we will have also our exhibition. You can continue the conversation here, not the least importantly, because we need to get this room ready for the next part of, for the next session and next event. So please feel free to move to the room in front of us and to make the most of the exhibition. And also to those invited for the gala dinner, they're welcome to join from 7 p.m. for an apéro. The gala dinner will start at 7:30. So once again, thank you very much to all of you for being an active part of this Solar Heat Europe high-level event. Thank also to all of our supporters who have helped us make this event possible. And till the next time, hopefully.